Hi everyone. We're just going to give everyone a couple of moments just to file into the seminar now, to the webinar now, and then we'll begin. Okay, hi everyone. We're going to begin. My name is Joe McGrath, and I'm the VP for EDI in the College of Social Sciences and Law. I'm delighted to be hosting this International Women's Day event today. The theme this year is Embrace Equity. To celebrate this, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Lydia Foy, the UCD Alumna who led the legal challenges to the law on gender recognition in Ireland. Lydia's long fight for gender recognition not only allowed her to finally live as herself, it paved the way for further historic social change in Ireland and eventually led to the passing of the Gender Recognition Act 2015. This legislation enables trans people to have their gender recognised in law. Lydia's fight took place during a time of significant social change in Ireland, as Ireland developed into a more progressive and inclusive society, and Lydia was an important part of that. For International Women's Day and its theme of embracing equity, we explore her remarkable legal journey. To do so, we're joined by her Senior Counsel in her case, Mr. Bill Shipsey, who will lead this conversation. Bill is a UCD Alumni Awardee, a human rights activist, and a retired Senior Counsel. Bill and Lydia, over to you.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you very much, Joe, and hello, Lydia. It's
good morning. Good morning. Great to see you.
Even virtually on International Women's Day.
Yeah,
Lydia, before
lovely,
I start and to ask you questions, what I thought it might be useful for those listening in would be to give a very brief background on the history of the litigation without going into any detail, so that people can get some sense of the long road that you had before there was recognition for you, for your gender, and also before the enactment of the Act in 2015. And it is in fact 30 years, if my recollection is correct. It was 1993 that you first applied to the Registrar of Births, Marriages and Deaths to have your birth cert rectified so that your gender as a woman could be recognized in that. And then 4 years later, I think you'd had a somewhat fruitless correspondence with the registrar who was denying you the opportunity to have your birth cert rectified. You approached FLAC, and in fact, I think it was Mary Johnson, who was the solicitor in FLAC at the time, who recognized that she thought that you had a good case. And through her, Eileen Barrington was contacted, and Eileen in turn contacted me, and we commenced proceedings on your behalf in 1997. Judicial review proceedings in which we sought to challenge the decision of the registrar to refuse you your rights. You'll remember then that in 2000 we had a long hearing in the High Court before Mr. Justice McKechnie. It ran for 14 days. We had expert witnesses from Holland and England and psychiatric evidence to explain what transgenderism was and to explain to the court the legal and medical issues that were involved for you. We were initially unsuccessful, and then in 2005, the European Convention on Human Rights was incorporated into Irish law. We went back to the court, and eventually in 2014, ultimately, but first I think it was in 2009, Mr. Justice McKechnie held in your favor. And your case and the decision in your case was the first time that there was a declaration of incompatibility with the European Convention on Human Rights, declaration of incompatibility that Irish law didn't comply with the obligations under that. So that was, I think, almost 17 years till the proceedings settled eventually. And then in 2015, the Gender Recognition Bill became the Gender Recognition Act. And you got the first certificate, the first birth certificate under that act, recognizing you as a woman in that birth certificate. But I think what I'd like to do is perhaps ask you, what first motivated you? What was it, as it were, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, that persuaded you that you needed to do something when you were refused a recognition for the gender that you were then living in back in 1993? What moved you to actually do something and to want to litigate?
Well, first of all, I thought I was the worst person you could take in order to take that challenge up, because I was sort of older than I thought I should have been, without, collapsing in a heap, which of course I did in the end. But I also thought as somebody that had no family complications of any kind, and maybe much younger, would have been in a much better position. And I would have sort of anything for a quiet life. The birth cert wouldn't have been number one on my list had I been treated what I thought would be fairly in society. And I felt that the birth cert was used as an excuse to deprive me of basic rights and to trivialize my existence or my need for it, which was, I thought, a little bit of a ridiculous approach when they said that anyone can ridicule you. They can ask for your old name, they can ask for whatever, and they can deny you basically anything. And of course, the birth cert is irrelevant. Well, if the birth cert is irrelevant, how can you justify treating somebody like that? And if the birth cert is the only way of getting redress, then I have to go for it, because in fact, the birth cert initially hadn't been my priority. I felt I was just treated so badly in society and represented so badly in church and law and in family matters, etc., that I had applied to FLAC and to redress actually other matters that I felt, that were treating me less than a citizen with full rights. So they thought at that stage that they didn't have the capacity, because I'd already tried to exhaust any way of appeal. And initially, I was turned down for my list completely. But at the bottom of my list was the birth cert, actually. And when I got back to FLAC again, I was advised that it was free legal advice, and that if I lost a case, I would have to pay for it, and that any assets or anything I had, well, I had nothing at the time anyway. But quite a sort of an ominous sort of soundings initially. But then when it finally came back that they would think of, in the interest of review of the births, marriages, deaths register, and that they would possibly find this of interest. And it was Mr. Bill Shipsey himself who actually initiated everything for applying in an open court for leave to seek judicial review. And very few people understand that I was not looking for any mad publicity. I was looking for basic rights. But when that sprung, actually got to the media before it got to me, because somebody came to my door and said, "It's all out." And I said, "What's all out?" And it was like that. So the frenzy then was to call me a selfish bitch and to say that I was actually doing this to embarrass not alone my family, but society in general. And it's actually I'm sort of correcting that now, in that there was no look for publicity, and the initial media interest came even before I had knowledge of it. But it was as a result of accepting looking for the judicial review, which was the only actually area left open to me, because I had exhausted I'd written to everybody in the world, including John Major at that stage. So that's how it happened. So there weren't a lot of choices about it. I actually tried to conform. There was nothing sort of brave or anything about me for a long time. I tried to conform in my very best, but I ended up with a severe eating disorder, and I had a very bad leg operation. And let me see, in 1982, I was very, very unwell for some time. But I would say that I was in very bad shape and had to do something about it, basically. And when I originally approached the psychiatric profession, etc., they had very little knowledge, and they were referring to old books on the subject. And of course, it's still in a lot of dictionaries and everything else said, oh, it's C under sexual deviancy. That was the sort of approach, and yet it had been updated in the sort of register in Europe, you know, as a genuine condition, etc., but not in references generally available to people who weren't informed, let's put it.
Yeah. But over that 30-year period, it was obviously a period of great social change within Ireland. Attitudes were changing. I don't know if you recall, during the legal argument in the first sort of High Court hearing, where there was reference to David Norris' case and attitudes that were mentioned in that. And there was a recognition by the trial judge, by Mr. Justice McKechnie, that Ireland had changed and that was changing. And I suppose also that you were part of that change, because certainly, although Mr. Justice McKechnie felt he couldn't hold with us in the first case, he was enormously sympathetic towards your case and had urged in the course of his judgment for the government to legislate and to act, which didn't happen until 2015. Can you just tell the people who are listening in today just something about that, you know, how you felt when the 2015 bill became the 2015 Gender Recognition Act? Because we got in Ireland, as a result of your efforts and campaigning, and as a result of the case, we got quite a progressive and liberal gender recognition act in Ireland compared to other countries. What was your feeling, or what was your sense when that became law?
I remember there was a scramble to try and get as many rights within that as we could, because we had the first declaration of incompatibility. We had trying to get break away from just being referred to English psychiatrists, etc. And there were very severe principles sort of involved in gender recognition within a lot of places, which included Benjamin principles. You had to meant to be gladly carrying out without any other pressures, working as yourself, etc., and being what should they call it? You know, in mode or whatever. You're expected to be actually like a very femme, which is not necessarily. Every woman is not terribly femme. You can be butcher, but whatever, you can still be female. But you had to present as being feminine in a hostile society, and probably go through horrendous electrolysis and hormone treatment and psychological changes and all of that. So by the time it came to the actual announcement of that major progress, I was just absolutely on tenterhooks, because I didn't know if we were going to have to take as much as we could without pushing the final bit for marriage equality and the whole lot encompassed together. And I was beginning to, I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And Michael Farrell, who was the main person there with me at the time, he had been really wonderful, and he held his cool when it came to the human rights commissioners, and they were sympathetic, but he was great keeping the sort of hold on to it. But I was totally exhausted. But just before the birth cert was issued, I had actually sort of nearly taking a break, and he said, you know, we must get you the first, you know, he was very,
Adamant.
very anxious to get the actual piece of paper, and for me to have number one on it, which kindly the registrar and people like that finally understood how important it was. And of course they did put me on the number one number and everything, but there was a scramble for the birth cert at that stage, and great excitement, and all of the other parties, interested parties who have been, their rights have been delayed too. They were even, you know, they were Russian case. Remember the person looking for employment, and they had to wait for the outcome of my case, and all of these directives were going on pending the outcome of my case, you know, but pressures were there early on. But
do you have any sort of, I sense sort of from you, and even then the sort of sense of modesty that you don't even realize how significant what you achieved was. I mean, do you have any greater sense of that 8 years after the legislation was enacted, of just what a significant breakthrough you achieved through your case and through your courage and through fighting for what you believed was fair and right?
Well, I think it was wonderful. I was very insecure in a lot of the time, because initially I was so badly represented in the press, etc. I felt I didn't have the right to reply to any, you know, to general society in general. And once FLAC and all the people involved in FLAC, I probably can't remember, or shouldn't try and list them all off now, but they were all,
Johnson was
they were
there, and Maureen
fabulous. Yeah.
McGuire was there.
And all of them, yeah. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, there was a tremendous amount of pressure along the way, but the sense of achievement then, a lot of the sense of achievement was in the actual getting to the incompatibility with European, you know, because people had sort of tried that in other ways, and felt that they didn't have access without a real adversarial system, and sometimes the person involved might have been very well, or mightn't have even lived beyond the judicial review proceedings. In my case, of course, you know, it's 20 whatever plus years, 1982, I think it probably started, you know, but you know, for me it was tough, because I said to Michael and to yourself, I said, am I not the worst person with the most difficult circumstances to take this on? So having achieved it, I suppose I should feel it's all amazing, but it wouldn't have been without FLAC's actually support, courtesy of letting me reply the whole time. And if I was accused of something, you know, did you meet were you talking to Professor Gorham? You know, did you actually go to England? Were you talking to Dr. Royal or Russell in London, and etc.? And I could.
You were certainly very well looked after by FLAC. You were certainly very well looked after by FLAC, and
I was,
It was a very significant victory the second time round when Mr. Justice McKechnie held that Ireland's legislation was incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. You had two other lawyers then representing you. Had Mr. Justice, who's now Mr. Justice Hogan, who's now in the Supreme Court, and you also had Siobhan Phelan representing.
They were both great. I didn't give them enough credit.
So at least some of your past lawyers have gone on to better and greater things.
Oh yeah.
And then just when that happened in 2015, there was also another award for you. You became one of the European Citizens of the Year in recognition of your achievement and in recognition of your bravery. What did that mean to you?
Well, I sort of thought in a way that you come from being the total reject of society to meeting important people and being recognized as our president, Michael D, was so good to me. But I just thought of some of the folks in the Magdalen laundries who again were like to repent for their sins for the rest of their life in laundry because they were pregnant out of marriage or, you know, whatever excuse there was. But I remember one woman, and she met, I think it was the Taoiseach, and got a nice reception, I think, in the Oireachtas. But she had been sort of, again, like that, with a guilty conscience and left to work away under very, very austere conditions. And all of a sudden from that, the contrast was that she was meeting, you know, the Taoiseach, which I felt a little bit like that at times, that, you know, from, yeah.
I mean, Ireland has changed enormously over that 30-year period since you've started it. But in another way, Lydia, and you don't perhaps do yourself, you give yourself enough credit, you were part of that change. Because if there weren't people like Lydia Foy to challenge the system and to put their head above the parapet, and I know there were awful things written and said and reported about you during that period, the change mightn't have happened. So it does take the Rosa Parks and the Lydia Foys of this world to make change happen. Could I just ask you this? And I know we don't have, we could talk for hours, I know, but looking back on the sort of 30 years and, you know, what you set out to do and what you've achieved, if you were back in 1993 and you knew all that was going to be involved, would you do it again?
Well, no, rien, je ne regrette rien. I know, I felt like that question, I don't think I had as much choice as you realize, because I really waited until I was very unwell before I got treatment in the first place. And then I did try everything, compromise, whatever, to take on. That was the only redress I had. So I can't say there was any other road open to me. You know, like, I know I had to try and know something about the law, and I'm trying to understand this adversarial system, or I still don't quite get that it should have been applied to the degree it was, considering it wasn't like a criminal case. It was a case for looking at the books of law, let's put it, in Ireland in relation to Europe and civil and human rights, etc. But some of that was very tough and rough. I was, you know, I was sent to a public clinic for a transvaginal ultrasound, and I was the only non-pregnant woman in the waiting there for that. You know, and then they wouldn't accept blood tests from my GP, and I had to go up to the Coombe, and all of this sort of thing went on. And then the case was delayed for a year, waiting for the state psychiatrist to give his report because he hadn't been well. But then when the system meant that I didn't have access, immediate access to his report, and then they look at others. So there were so many, let's say, cards up the sleeve of let's say, the government side or the opposition side, or whatever, I don't know how diplomatically to put it, but to the other parties, they seem to have all of the trump cards. And if you wanted to be made insecure, there were lots of ways they could do it, you know.
Ultimately, you triumphed. And what would you say to the next Lydia Foy? Obviously, you've fought and won the battle on behalf of the transgender community, but what would you say to the next young Lydia Foy coming up in terms of trying to achieve social change through the courts or through a battle that you had? What would you say to them?
I always said, even if you can't afford it, try and get a photocopy or keep original documents. And people, if they're trying to put you down, very often they are arrogant, or what should I say, they will make mistakes. They have some inadequacy that means that they have to try and change your life or change, you know, society as it treats you. So, but to where possible, don't delegate. Come and tell your own story, because if you're relying on somebody who's untrustworthy, you'll get probably a totally different version of the true circumstances. So as much as possible, try and hold on to good friends and try and, hopefully inform in the best, nicest, gentlest way you can family. But now I'm glad to say with the new organizations and the new presence of TENI and all of these organizations within the gay and the full community there, that very often parents are encouraged nice and gently to come in and see what it's all about. And as you say, the world won't collapse immediately if you don't have to lock somebody in the shed anymore in case your family will be embarrassed. That diversity is there, and it's always been there, but
it's now recognized.
It's recognized now, but when it's recognized in law, there isn't a given stick to beat people with, if you know what I mean. There isn't an excuse. But that's what the birth cert was all about. Without the birth cert, the rights didn't come. So that was the reason why I had to get the birth cert. It sounds illogical, but that was the way, even though they kept on saying, oh, it's only a historic document, etc. And you were a selfish bitch to carry on at that. But the true story is that was the only way to have some redress to fairness, Right.
Joe, I see you've come back into the picture. And is there any sort of final question from UCD that you'd like to put to Lydia? Lydia, just from my perspective, it's great to see you again. It's great to have been in conversation.
Great. And your great work along the way.
It was a great honor to represent you with a lot of other fine lawyers down the years.
Yeah. Thanks,
well,
everybody.
Regrettably, apologies, Lydia.
I was just going to say happy Women's Day to everybody, and hello to everyone. I'm useless at social media, so if I'm not in contact with everybody, now's my chance. Thank you all very, very much for support and understanding, and have a great Women's Day today.
Thank you. I think we're out of time, regrettably. So that will bring our session to a close. First and foremost, Lydia, I want to thank you for so generously sharing your own personal reflections and your experiences with us today in such an honest and an open and a forthright way. Your story details your struggles and your fight just to be yourself. It's a very human story of the quest to live an authentic life and to seek recognition and equality before the law. The need to further promote inclusion and belonging continues, of course, but the Ireland we live in now is far more progressive and values difference more than it has before. And your battle and your story has contributed to that change. I also want to thank Bill for so expertly leading this conversation. Thanks are also due to those behind the scenes for all their work in helping to organise the event, not least John Weir in the Alumni Office. And thanks also to Professor Colin Scott, the Vice President for EDI and UCD, for supporting the event. Thank you. That's it from us.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Lydia.
Thanks very much, Bill. Great to see you again. Bye.